got far less response this time than earlier. Everybody's getting worn out already. Are we all set? We take up that one point. I was reminded of something that I made a mental note on and then forgot to take it up with you. Remember, I was telling you that at the end of the week of the 4 language groups, which Bob invited Francis Brabitson and myself to attend as the only Westerners. He had a little table at the side with these papers, and he said, here are various addresses, some only 1 or 2 sentences long, that I've given out carefully in the manner as I've explained, had Erich explained to you, that I worked with Erich on God Speaks, and that was important because it has the atom bombs of spiritual energy associated in with it. So I took those, but then I didn't tell you what I did with that little sheet of paper, because that was absolutely astonishing. I took them back. I think I was living in San Francisco at the time. And when I got home, I remember going into my bedroom at any rate and saying, well, now what under the sun do I do with this? Because it was obvious that there was absolutely no order, and the fascinating statements, but how do you bring some sort of order out of the chaos of some little tiny clippings of paper and longer ones, 1 or 2 pages? And so I decided, well, the only thing I can do is just quickly go through and see if there are certain major subjects. That I quickly did, and I decided there, I think, were something like 8 major subjects. So I said, all right, first of all, I will get the pieces of paper sorted out by the major subjects. So I just took the sheaf of papers as Baba had given it to me, and stuffed it into a manila envelope in my briefcase, brought it home, hadn't even had a chance to go through out of curiosity to see what the material was, and there I had riffled through in the order that Baba had given them to me, and now I was sitting down and starting to arrange them into 8 piles by subject matter. So I put this, and yeah, that one goes there, and that one goes there, and so on. And so eventually I had all of the sheets of paper divided into 8 neat little piles. And so I said to myself, now is going to be the real work. So I pick up the first pile. I could not believe it. The first top paper introduced a subject, very simply. The next little piece of paper elaborated on the subject from the point that the first piece of paper left it. Maybe not perfectly, but I mean, the logic was there. The third piece of paper, my God, the same old story again. I could not believe what was happening. I went through the whole pile. It was all in logical order already. Pile number 2, well, I'm getting almost a little bit blasé by that time. I expected it to be, and it was. Third pile, same, on through 8. They were all in perfect logical order.
And there's Listen Humanity.
This is part 2 of Listen Humanity. And Baba's not a stoopnagle. Is that disappeared?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. He's not an idiot. That hasn't disappeared, has it? You can understand that. So it's pretty dense and sometimes complex reading, and there they all were, in proper order. I thought that was really great. And all I had to do, I don't think there was one occasion where I had to make up a bridging sentence. Many, many times there was not even a word that was necessary. Once in a while, I would coin part of a phrase and stick in. When I sent this off to Ramju Abdullah, who Baba had said would, take the more difficult things up with me, and I sent this on to him, and he saw what was going on. He said, Don, I cannot believe it. you have performed a miracle of getting these things into logical order.
I thought Baba said he would help you.
Well, I didn't tell Ramju anything about what Baba had said, and I didn't tell him it was Baba who did the miracle. I just said I was surprised too, Ramju. End of conversation on it. But that was it. I love that little one, but it worked out that way. So now we've got a toughie.
Can I just say one thing about that?
Mm-hmm.
As far as I know, it's one of the only books in the Mayor Baba literature that was Baba's idea from beginning to end.
Yeah, this is true. He was the one who gave every single, what should I say, outline, the whole basic strategy of the thing. All of it was Baba's idea.
Listen, humanity.
Second part.
What?
You're talking about second part.
I'm talking about
All?
all, yeah. It was his idea to take the secretary's transcript for the first part and Don make sort of like a frame around a photograph, you know. In other words, I put in, we woke up at such and time and so on, and the boy brought the shoe shine and got my shoes polished, you know, those little things like that. That was done. But Baba said, you put the personal framing around the event, and I will give you the heart of it. And that was it. And then he said, now you've had some reactions too, and so just be honest and tell your reactions to various things, and that was what I did in part 3. Baba just said, use what you have thought and felt about these things and tell people. So all of it was Baba's say-so. Now we've got a toughie. I told you yesterday, you remember, that it was 1952 when I first met Baba, and that was the beginning, you might say, of my editing career on all these projects that he gradually dreamed up, which we went through yesterday afternoon, essentially. And I said that it was realizing when they had this 50th anniversary meeting at Prague in remembrance of Baba's accident there, that made me realize this is 50 years that I've been working on Baba's various writings, editing, constantly, 50 years of it, and I always promised myself that before I left this mortal coil, unquote Shakespeare, is that about right, Jack? Mm-hmm. That I would get around to my old friends and just spin out what I feel I owe Baba and I owe my friends, to recount to them the history of how Baba brought up these various things, and I got involved and we brought out the various different editions, plus these absolutely fascinating things that would come up incidentally as we were working on the editing together. So you're getting the composite history. This I promised myself a long time ago. But also, remember, and now you know the background of that Baba says that if you do something or volunteer something or asked about something, be honest and proportionately honest. So when I was almost ready to give the trial balloon in London a year ago, and I was going to say that what has motivated this has been the 50th anniversary, suddenly I realized, Stevens, you are about to make a major fracturing of your vow to Baba of absolute honesty. And the major fracturing was because several months before this idea had hit me and the anniversary came along, I was starting to get upset, more and more upset, by various things that I was reading in this magazine and that news sheet and that report of a meeting and so on, where people were reporting things about Baba and how he went about this and that, some of which were increasingly different from what I actually remembered and participated in with Baba.
Because you were there.
I was there, yes. And so what do you do? What do? You just sit with your hands folded? And I said, gee, we're getting into a pretty tough, important, and problematical, and delicate
part of this whole history. And this is something I've never bargained on. And I realized that Baba had never said, look, Don, you're going to have another job, be the policeman of the accuracy of my words. He said, never mentioned that to me, but it was implicit in all of the time that he had spent with me working on the importance of exactly what his words were and keeping them true, edition after edition, so on, how you handle it.
Yeah.
I learned all of this at Baba's knee, you might say, like a little kid. So I had implicitly a responsibility, not just to fold up shop and go sit under a coconut palm somewhere, but I had to say, look, this ain't as I remember it, and I think my memory is still pretty clear on most of these things, out of responsibility. And so another 1 or 2 or 3 of these things came out, and I was getting more and more upset and thinking to myself, my God, what under the sun do I do about this? And again, I don't remember whether I was in a hotel, because I spend so much time running around being in hotels until I'm around a nice family like the Chens, and they take me in as a boarder for a few days. But I think I was probably in a hotel again, and all of a sudden, thinking about this, I just said to the wall, God, what under the sun is going on here with your words, Baba? And then, for the second time, this was the second time, and this was only 3-4 years ago, so the first time happened before that, but that was a long in-between time with nothing that could possibly be interpreted as, let's say, a message from Bob or anything of the sort. And I heard words. I'm not going to quote the words exactly. They were fairly short and brief and terribly pointed. But I am not going to go either into dates, history, location, personalities, anything of the sort, because I don't think that's appropriate. But what Baba said to me was just terribly clear, and that was, this is, this time, the Judas function, is the betrayal of my words. And, there were 1 or 2, the Judas function, and there were 1 or 2 very specific sentences, quite specific and so on. I'm not going to repeat them, but I certainly said to myself, this makes sense. I had never thought of it that way. But Baba's words are in the process of being betrayed right here and now, and I'm seeing it. And I've got to do something. I've got to tell people this is where the betrayal will go on for our beloved Baba this time. It's not his body that is betrayed, but it's the words. And so we've all got a responsibility. Now, I know this is a rather drastic thing to say because, of course, Judas has come down famously in Christian literature as being the betrayer and the horrible skunk and so on. Baba, of course, has straightened us out somewhat that he had to do it, and it had to be set up that way. And so it was not because he was that bad an individual, but nevertheless, the Judas function continues to operate, and this time it's in relation to his words. So this was really the second great big pillar of why I got on my horse and started planning these seminars on Baba's Word. And it's important, isn't it? I think if we can do anything as we sit and alert ourselves that I am convinced that Baba himself told me that this time the Judas function relates to his words. This is a terribly important thing. Equivalent in importance to his telling Arish, I've attached these atoms, something like atom bombs of spiritual energy to each of my words. That was a seminal key statement. And here is the other key seminal statement, but Baba wasn't sitting with Arish. This formed in Stevens's head. But I know inside of myself it's true. It is too apt to be any sort of an imagination. We've all got a responsibility here. And what I simply say is, I don't think you have to have been sitting with Baba in order to know what his words were. the things that Baba gave out have been, to this point, the originals terribly carefully handled. I told you the story of part 2 and what I did with those papers. One of the reasons is I want you to know just how much, roughly percentage-wise, of part 2 of Listen Humanity is Mayor Baba, and about how much is Stevens, maybe putting in a few tiny little, but I didn't even make the order in which they were. My story that I told you just a few moments ago is completely accurate. Baba did even the arranging of the logical order of those blessed things. I didn't even have to do that for it. And there were just a few words, and on 3 or 4 occasions, even maybe half of a sentence stuck in order to bridge over a tiny bit. So we know absolutely, certainly in relation to 8 chapters of God Speaks, which is a lot of material, how that has been handled. And Baba himself, I talked with him exactly what I was doing and how much was going on. I did not have conversations with Baba about the supplement. So I cannot tell you anything about the supplement. There are stories in the existing archival records from prominent people indicating that Baba himself went deeply into the correction of the supplement. He did not say that to me. Ivy, even at the time, did not say that to me. I have already told you of what I know came direct from Baba before edition number 1 came out, and that was some material which was included as footnotes in quotation marks direct from Baba, and a section of the supplement which we put in quotation marks. We said Baba said the following, and put all of that in quotation marks. From my knowledge, this is the absolute total of the truth about what we have of Baba and what has been changed. So the rest of the supplement, as far as I know and have ever had any indication, is straight from Ghani with Baba. If he exercised some sort of supervision and control of the supplement, it was a minimum amount from everything that I know. End of story there. So then we get on to another subject, which is the discourses. And you've heard my little story on the discourses that Baba prodded me into reading the discourses. And certainly all I did there in the 3 little blue books was to revise sentence structure from the awkward Indian styling of even a highly scholarly English-speaking scholar such as Deshmukh was. But I did not change words. I cannot tell you, however, that the discourses were given out by Baba in the manner that he described, that he hung the atom bombs of spiritual energy word by word. I cannot say that that is true of the discourses at all. Go ahead.
It's very interesting to note that when Baba explained the hanging of atom bombs of spiritual energy on his words, he said that in results of your conversation with him about you don't know what good it'll all do to get the discourses published. So it's a direct link there that was part of the conversation.
It was linked right in the time period into the work on the discourses.
So that's interesting.
It's an interesting point to be borne in mind. And all I can say to you is that on the 2 occasions when Bob and I talked about the importance of the discourses to the present generation in America, then in Europe, I brought up the thing that, Baba, I feel, my instinct is that your discourses are your Bible of daily life for the oncoming seeking generation. That was the way I described it, and Baba said, yes, you're right. This is true. And so there is no question in my mind of the tremendous key importance of the discourses. But I certainly cannot say to you that I know, therefore, that if you sit down and bone up on the discourses, that you will automatically absorb spiritual energy from it, which will be very important in your spiritual ongoing. I can't say that. but I can't say that I know it's not true on the other hand. Baba may have, let's say, also hung atom bombs of spiritual energy on them. I love the discourses. I go on reading them constantly and working on them constantly, because to me they're the essence of Baba in our daily life. Whereas God speaks is the essence of, let's say, creation and what it's up to. Now, there is also a little story that I want to tell you. How are we doing on time? Gee whiz, do you realize the morning's almost flooded already? I thought we sat down about 15 minutes ago.
Well, it's a timeless moment.
A timeless moment. We've got a poet in our midst.
Hey, Dan.
There we go. So, this has to do with the Song of the New Life. Gee whiz, we haven't even gotten into intuition yet this morning, have we?
Yet, we're gonna have a big afternoon.
Holy Moses. Oh, we've at least got to introduce intuition this morning.
Yeah, you promised.
Life at its best. Beams, if you are. Yeah. Well, let's get back to one or two other stories about how Baba handled this or that we know pretty well. The one that fascinates me most of all, I've always loved the whole concept of the new life, Baba going off with these chosen mandali and wandering around and begging, you know. I don't enjoy a begging life, but I'm just fascinated that the avatar thought there was something important enough to do something like that and put the closest and the cream of the mandali through the same period. I have to tell you one thing that happened. Once I did something that was so brave for a change that when I told Arish about it, he sat back flabbergasted and said, "Don, you did that?" Now, he wasn't saying you're a weak-kneed pussycat usually or anything like that, but he was impressed that I got that store of bravery to make a decision and act on it. He said, and he knew my fascination about the new life, but he would never tell me much about it. But he said, for that, I'm going to tell you the story of the new life. So next time you come, if you want to tape record it, you can. So he worked making a long outline. He did his homework before I came, and he got the women mandali to sit down and work with Mani to make up similar notes. So Arish for a day and a half and the women mandali for a half a day told me their story, and that became Tales from the New Life. That was where the Tales from the New Life, because I got brave for a change. So, all of that, Arish dictated and the women dictated, and at the end of 2 days, Arish leans back in his chair looking sort of a little worried but triumphant and says, "Well, Don, what do you think about the story of Baba's new life?" And I said, "Well, Arish, it is absolutely fascinating, and what a saga, what adventures you people went through." And then, I don't know why, you know, Stevenson's big foot that gets to the nearest mud puddle as soon as possible. So I stuck my foot right in it and I said, "But Arish, how did you people ever manage to endure months and months and months of hardship like that?" Arish's face just sank and he looked so sad. If Baba had looked sad about, I don't know what good it's all going to do, you should have seen Arish. He looked like death warmed over for a few minutes, and then he said, "Don, then I failed you." Now, can you imagine putting in Arish in a spot with something you said to cause Arish to say, "Then I failed you"? The closest friend you could ever have in your life just to say that to you. So I just felt sick at heart, and I said, "Oh, well, Arish, you know, this is so wonderful of you to do all of this, and it's a fascinating..." "No, Don, I failed you then." And so I shut up. And so then he went on and said, "Don, how can I possibly describe to you in words the glory of companionship with the avatar for months and months in close, constant contact, the glory of companionship of the avatar?" And so I suddenly said to myself, golly, that certainly is the essence of it. And this word companionship linked right into Baba's last message on the alphabet board and interlinks companionship. As soon as we read the last message on the alphabet board, we said, this whole business of companionship, real companionship, is key. And here's Arish bringing it out and then into Tales from the New Life. So, to me, the New Life has been fascinating, and Arish fleshed it out, and I had this word from Arish that this was the key essence of what they got from Baba during the course of the New Life. This is important. So then, in the course of getting the New Life, what became Tales from the New Life ready for the editor, of course, I went, got the Song of the New Life, which I've always loved. I call it the most wonderful, incendiary, revolutionary document in all of esotericism. I love it. But what Baba says in there, if you're a good classic esotericist, should make your hair stand on end. You know, just about every good sanctified rule almost seems to get tossed into the ash can in that song. So I went to that, and it always bothered me. I went to Purdom to get that, and because the logic didn't seem to fit, let not your garden be destroyed, because then you'll renew it. It seems to me that what Purdom was saying, Baba said in that song, contradicted itself. Don't let it, and yet you're going to do it anyway, so it always bothered me. So I finally went to Adi Sr., who was still holding out at trust office, and said, Adi, by any chance, do you have source material even older than Purdom's The God Man, the Song of the New Life? He said, Don, that's interesting. You know, actually, I've still got a few copies left, and I'll tell you what happened. Here was Baba off on the New Life, and he gave several points to Ghani for a song, a poem that Ghani was supposed to write up. And then the next day, Ghani brought it, and Baba manipulated it and did this and that. You know, usually people say the Song of the New Life is Ghani. It isn't. It isn't. Baba did it the same way he did 8 chapters of God Speaks with Arish. This is what Adi Sr. described to me. And so he said, finally, he had, after he had corrected it, he had it sent to me, but with a note that I was to get it set up in print, and before it was printed and sent out to his lovers around the world, I was to send back a galley proof from the printer for a second correction. Now, this is the only thing that I ever heard that Baba went over, not just once and corrected, but went over twice. And that said to me, Don, this is a tremendously important document. So if I'm telling people things that I think just have to be loaded with, you know, spiritual energy, then I would certainly say the Song of the New Life has to be one of the principal ones of them.
But
Also,
maybe when they were with Baba, it was very important, but if we will start singing this song, it will, lose this importance. Maybe it's loaded with energy. It was loaded at that time.
Well, I have a little different concept of the energy level of the avatar than you have, I guess.
I don't know. I have no concept at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, they are loaded and they stay loaded.
They stay loaded.
Yeah,
okay.
I think they do. And I think secretly he's got a pipeline over from heaven and reloading them periodically.
Got a question?
Yeah.
Don,
Yes.
I can't believe the coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a great deal of time last night and went through Listen Humanity,
Mm-hmm.
and I found the atom bomb in the New Life that is printed this way. And for years, it starts, the New Life is endless.
That's a different thing than the Song of the New
But it
Life.
also says Meher Baba. And for years, I have wondered, I know the Song of the New Life and in Listen to Humanity, very clear who was involved and how Baba was, the words came from Bob.
Yeah.
And I wonder why I find this an atom bomb also. Is
Why
this
not?
truly from Bob, the new life is
Yeah.
endless?
Yeah.
Those are his words.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I find this the most
That is
radical.
absolutely true.
Sure. It's just important to make the distinction. They're two different documents.
Yes, and
Okay.
I'm afraid.
But this
when
is
I
a good
speak-
thing to bring up, because I want to make it terribly clear. Bob at no time said, Don, I have told you stories and given you the list of everything that I have attached these atom bombs to. He did not say that to me. So I'm just always open and praying that we'll come across more stories before everybody who is around has passed on, indicating, yeah. And we think we've got a fairly good lead on the life at its best, yeah. But there are a few discrepancies still there. But nevertheless, boy, Baba went a long way in the same direction with that. Anyway, this is open game.
Making the atom bomb
Yeah.
simile.
The atom bomb.
So appropriate.
Yeah. Let's keep our eyes and ears open for possibilities of other things that can still be well authenticated as Baba having handled them in that special way. But anyway, Song of the New Life is certainly one of them, and doubly so because he did it twice
Do you
there.
want to explain to them what you found out about that sentence that Purdom had written about let not?
Well, Purdam's logical mind, he couldn't conceive an invitation to destroy the garden, so he said, let not the garden be destroyed. So this is Purdam. Can you imagine? I love Purdam. He was a wonderful man, absolutely. But he couldn't resist his subconscious leanings. You know, he was too orderly a man to let somebody come in and destroy his garden.
So he changed that
He changed it.
sentence and published it in The God Man, the biography of Meher Baba.
And you know what? Even after we pointed out what had happened, people still go on quoting Purdom when. Isn't that
It's easier to
interesting?
quote Purdom.
It's easier to get a volume of the God Man.
No, to quote is easier to say. You feel better about that than,
Well, some people do.
yeah. Right.
If they don't have a logical mind and read to the end of the sentence.
This brings up a huge point, but I don't know if you want to get into it.
Come along a little bit. Let's have a huge point. I'm getting hungry. Go ahead.
The alteration of Baba's words to make you feel better is a huge jungle of problems, and it brings up the issue that came up in London when we first did this, with the changing of Meher Baba's discourses in the 7th edition.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, we must spend a little more time on discourses and what happened on the recent edition. Maybe we better do that now.
We got 15 whole minutes.
Yeah. And save intuition, lock, stock, and barrel for after lunch. But then we've got to go into tactual sublimation, too.
Afternoon is long.
You mean we're going to stay until 6 o'clock?
No, but I mean, if we spend 15 minutes on discourses, I think it's worthwhile.
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, at any rate, I've told you the story about how Baba got me involved in the discourses, what I did, and we published the results in Japan as the 3 little blue books, which were easy to carry around and people sort of liked them. But always, because the discourses are such a pillar in Baba lore, Baba literature, that people are always very, very aware of them. So when Baba dropped the body, immediately people in the trust said, well, because people are rapidly disappearing, even Mandali who were around, we must make a further addition. And I should point out, other people had pointed out that there were some fairly identifiable mistakes still in the little 3-volume work, and also that there was a very important material that Baba had given out on the circle, which immediately seemed to be clear should be included in the discourse. Jack, you want to add something in there?
Yes, as you know, I worked first with Adi, then the trust for
Absolutely.
copyrights.
Yeah.
And in the mid-80s, I was concerned about the copyright of the 3-volume discourses needing to be updated.
I see.
So I never mentioned to you this before, but
Please go ahead, Jack. This is good.
Flag Chris was working on the bibliography, And I made a suggestion that perhaps Flag could do a index of the discourses, and then get them republished as one volume with that index, and the index would update the copyright of the discourses.
Clever ploy.
And then that was accepted, and then it evolved into the 7th edition. It got a...
Can you tell us any more of the steps, how Erich and Balnatu got involved with Flag in the project?
Well, Balnatu was working with Flag in terms of the bibliography.
I see.
And
What do you mean bibliography? Bibliography means the number of books
yeah,
involved.
that was the project that Flag was working on initially, was making all this list of all the books that had ever been published.
I see.
That was the initial project, that's why Flag had come to India.
Okay.
And then, when he was there, I recognized the good work he was doing and suggested that, we needed an index anyway for the discourses. It would be nice, but we needed that to get a new copyright date, to update the copyright.
Okay.
And they accepted that, and then that seemed to get the process going in which then the whole discourses was,
Tossed into the hopper.
as part of that process,
Yeah.
which from the legal
Grew
point
like
of view,
topsy. It grew like topsy, the
on its
project.
own,
Yeah.
there was a force on its own, and I like that because of the importance of, getting a fresh copyright date
Sure.
on that. In terms of Erich's and Balnatu's involvement, it's because Balnatu was already working with Flag Chris, they had a relationship, and it just continued from there.
Yeah. Well, let us say I got involved constantly into the discourses later on because of the translations into French, German, and Spanish that were going on.
I remember I encouraged them to contact you for a new, you had to revise your introduction.
Sure.
Discourse into this.
Yes, I was asked to be responsible for the revised introduction.
And I was encouraging that because you did the first one.
Yeah. Actually, I felt very flattered.
Okay.
Yeah. It satisfied my ego.
Right.
Yeah. So here we are. I had edited the 3 little volumes and then backed out and then sort of got involved again from the standpoint of translations being done into French, German, Spanish, as agreed with Bob. And he said, yes, this is necessary. These are the ones I want. And so as it became evident that the new edition of the discourses could be substantially different in some sections from the original, then the Trust and Flag and so on felt, well, we've got to keep Stevens updated on what is going on. So...
And this is about the 1980s, right?
Yep, right. 1980s. So I get, Flag was really, he is such a good workman and so cooperative. So he would send me chapters and sections that he felt were necessary for especially the Spanish translator was working at that time. And so I would get them from him. And then, let me see, now, they finally felt that they had the edition about ready. I think that Sheriar had supposedly just about a last and final corrected type out, print out from a computer disk, and they wanted to get out the edition. Flag went off to Kuwait to take on a job, and Erich and Balnatu officially severed and said, well, Flag says there's still a few grammatical corrections that need to be made, and so he can go on and do that on his own. So Flag then left India and kept doing further changes, and because of his very conscientious and cooperative nature, kept sending me the later corrections. Very frequently, let's say, only spelling but sometimes, a revised sentences, whatnot. So I was busy marking up with red ink what Flagg was sending to me, of what he was doing after he left India. And I became, and now this is a personal story, but we've just got to get these things out and known because they're important. That's Baba's words. I began to get a little worried because I could see that Flagg was doing something that I call knee-jerk correction. In other words, there are certain, let's say, manners of very, very correct usage of English, which if you are going to be meticulously correct, you use in this fashion. But very frequently they are not colloquial and they almost sound a bit stilted if you use too much of this terribly correct English. So I began to worry as to whether or not he was making changes which would change the flavor, the colloquial, the language flavor of the discourses. So I did something that I took a lot of care in trying to puzzle out in my own mind. I knew I had to be honest. I knew it was important for the discourses. So I wrote a letter to Arish and said, Arish, have you been keeping track of what Flagg is continuing to do in Kuwait on the discourses? And Arish wrote back very, very nicely and correctly, oh yes, Flagg has complete authority to make further changes as he sees grammatically are necessary. And I'm personally certain that Baba is guiding him. So this was Arish direct to me. And so, I'm, for better or for not, I'm not gonna raise hell with Arish, even if it's so terribly rarely that Arish ever did or said anything that I disagreed with. I couldn't help but disagree, but I said to myself, if this is Arish taking this stand, as far as I'm concerned, that's the end of the story. And so I made no further objections. But I was very, very deeply concerned about the number of what I just had to call knee-jerk corrections and changes were being done. Grammatically correct, absolutely no question. Flagg is a brilliantly educated and intelligent individual. So everything that I saw that he did, from whatever I knew, I had to say, this is absolutely correct and proper usage of these English words. But still, I also had to say, I don't think a lot of these were necessary changes, and I do feel that the flavor, the idiomatic flavor of God Speaks, is being seriously damaged in the process. Discourses, yeah, is being changed. So I just simply left it there, and then I began to find out, particularly in the last couple of years, that a number of people who love the discourses have started to get concerned, and then one or two or three people that I have been very close to all of my Baba life, when I would run across them, would simply say, Don, I know you had a lot of work to do on the discourses. Have you seen what actually has happened between the original 3 little blue books and the current Shariar edition? And I said, well, I'm pretty well familiar. And then one of them put my nose to the grindstone and put a couple of years of research right in front of my face, where there were changes made that absolutely horrified me. And I said, my God, this is really serious. Much more serious than I thought it was.
Do you have an example?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I've got these home in the larder, but not carrying them around in my pack trap here.
Well,
I've loved Baba's words from
Yeah.
the beginning. I
Yeah.
love language, but especially Baba's words is so
Sure.
rich.
It is rich.
And although I resisted reading the discourses at first because someone told me it was Baba's like rule book, once I opened them up, it would just, I know, I've done drawings of the images in them. I've really worked with them, and I was really very disappointed. And I had 2 or 3 well-worn sets that they've fallen apart.
Yeah.
Couldn't be used anymore, so I was happy to hear there was a new edition coming out. I can't read it. And the core of it for me is that the flavor. The flavor has been taken out, which for me, anyway, is the container of the whole thing. And it's where whatever, maybe not atom bomb charge, but it's where that energy, that phantom bomb's presence is. And I kind of miss also the format, because it is the kind of thing that you want to be able to put in the back pocket and take out and just read a little bit, not a ponderous tome that you have.
I raised this point with Erich, although I had no authority before the Shariar edition came out, and said, Erich, so many young people say, for heaven's sake, can't you in the new edition keep the 3-volume format? And Erich wrote back to me, again, this was an Erich decision. He said, no, we feel that it is better for it to come out as a solid volume, as the other major Baba works are. So that was Erich's.
Just one other thing, the italics. I really miss your wonderful use of italics for flavor. Not just because it's a term like sanskara, but because it brings out the
I thought I would get away with that. Shame on you.
In the back, and then Jack, and then Harvey, I think.
Don,
Yes.
You've been talking a lot about the need to preserve Baba's word.
Yeah.
But the question of what constitutes Baba's words themselves seems equally problematic and very interesting, primarily because Baba used signs. So really when Baba says something, that's not a word in the ordinary sense of something that is spoken, but we get it as an approved translation when Erich says, Baba says X, and Baba nods, and then we know, okay, so that's Baba's word. But we have so many different kinds of levels to this work, right? We have kind of approved translations, we have reported speech, and it seems like part of what needs to be done is that we need to be careful about all of these different kinds of levels. And maybe you could speak to that, or maybe speak to where the boundary lies between what is authorized, like what is sort of authorized translation of
Well, the point you raise, of course, is the point that Purdom, in blunt words, raised in The God-Man. He said, we really do not have Baba's words. All we've got are things that came through secretaries and additions and changes and so on. And after all, he even gave up the alphabet board, so it gets even more nebulous at that point. So Purdom raised a good point, and this was quoted back to Baba. And because I raised this point with Baba very early in, let's say, the second editing of God Speaks, where we go for all this, that was the point where Baba had Erich break off, and in Baba's presence, Erich described to me the manner that Baba used, first of all, for God Speaks, and also related it to the atom bombs. And this was very, very precise. Baba had Erich tell me this twice, and so I knew this was terribly important. And the story is very simple. Baba would give Erich a series of key esoteric points, usually 2-3 hours worth of it. Erich would copy them down. Erich would take them back to his room. He would flesh it out because he knows Baba's way of thinking and wording things so well. He would bring back then the rewritten note material from the previous day, and he would read that out word by word to Baba. And Baba had it very, very clearly explained to me by Erich that the instant that Erich used any word that was not what Baba intended there, Baba would stop him and put the proper word in. Secondly, if there was some question about the meaning of an important word, then Baba would have, and this was Erich that Baba had do it. There are stories to the contrary, but it was Erich right then and there who did this for Baba. Baba would then have Erich repeat the alphabet out loud, and the clap of his hand stop him at the necessary next letter, and in this laborious manner spell out certain key important words. Baba wanted me to know indelibly the precise manner that the 8 first chapters of God Speaks were given out. He also then indicated to me, when he gave me the little sheaf of papers at the end of the first week of the language group meeting, that every single paper on that little table was an address which had been given to a Mandali in precisely the same manner that he had given the 8 chapters of God Speaks and corrected word by word by Baba himself, if necessary, spelling it out. So we know that part 2 of Listen Humanity had that intimate word-by-word attention of Mayor Baba. And we know the same thing for the Song of the New Life. I also am absolutely convinced that there is no question at all that O Parvardigar and also the prayer of repentance were handled by Baba in the same manner. I have been with Baba and with Arish and the Mandali too many nights and nights and nights and nights and nights when Baba would take us all out of Mandali Hall, put us in the semicircle facing Mayor's garden. He's standing in the circle, Arish at one end, and Arish read out O Parvardigar in Baba's presence. And Baba be in communion with God.
Was Baba facing the semicircle, or he?
No, he was facing the garden in the center of the semicircle. Usually I was to his left and Francis was holding him to the right. So this is a story of O Parvardigar. I have absolutely no question. In the manner of the history of the prayer of repentance, I always say these have got to be also included in the same manner.
And the Song of the New Life.
The Song of the New Life, absolutely.
And perhaps Life at its Best. We're still
Perhaps.
working on that.
Yeah. There are some fuzzy points that need, you know, if you say, I know from what I know of the background that these have got to be in the same category, you better be damn certain that you put your story together honestly and not trying to flip over a few points. I want as many words hung with Baba's atom bombs of psychic energy as possible, but I don't want to kid myself, and I don't want to be instrumental in trying to kid other people.
Possibly beams, that's another question mark.
Possibly beams, yeah.
But what happens with translation? After you translate the same God Speaks, which atom energy, what happens with this translation? Because translator will get benefit, definitely.
Okay.
The book,
All right?
after translated?
I simply tell you this. Baba himself gave me the responsibility for supervising the translations, point number 1. Point number 2, he selected the languages into which he wanted his major works translated. To me, it is inconceivable that Baba would, let's say, do for the English people what he did not do for his French, German, and Spanish translations. To me, it is inconceivable, Allah.
What about Russian?
What about Russian?
Yeah.
I can't carry it on, but what Baba said he wanted, I have no questions. Maybe he did it for others, maybe he will do it. He didn't say he wouldn't do it, but I certainly cannot say that I am convinced that he has done it for this language and Ubuntu and so on as well. I can't say that.
Yeah.
How can I honestly say it?
I can say it. Okay. Anything translated in a foreign language under Baba's direction through Don has the same atom.
We have a cue here of Harvey in the back, and then the blue, and then,
I think Harvey goes right to the head of the list there.
Well, mine's real simple. I want to clarify in my mind that in some of the addition there were mistakes made in Baba's concepts, not only language, his concepts.
In which edition?
The sevens.
can I respond to what he's saying?
Yeah, Little Bear would like to take you on that.
You can
Harvey.
correct me if I'm wrong, but we've been through this very clearly with, Dan Tyler has created a web page based on this work, and other people have been doing
A
this
lot of
research.
people have looked at that.
Jamie
and I think
Newell
it's
has been
terrific.
doing some comparisons. In the 7th edition, they have removed some of Baba's words, they have changed some of Baba's words, and they have added words that were not there before. So you can draw your own conclusions.
In the 6th edition, were there also mistakes in Baba's concepts?
I'm not aware of that.
I don't know the 6th edition, Harvey.
That's the one you were working on. The 3 volume.
Well, the
It's called
3 volume,
6th edition.
the 3 volume where nothing was changed in later editions. I have the authority, and I know what was and what was not done.
I wasn't saying, that's only clear in my mind.
You know, we even went so far as to have permanent plates made up and then used for the later reprintings. Yeah.
All the way in the back.
We didn't spend, nobody sent a check to change the plates, okay?
John, a question about the prayer of repentance. In
Yeah.
the last sentence, the use of the word will, as I've heard that Eric has said that if he had it to do over again, he would use wish instead of, which in a way would
Right.
make more sense, because everything that happens is according to Bob's will. And when we do something wrong, it's really against his wish, yes?
You know, I have postponed to my next lifetime to get Baba's will and Baba's wish straightened out. I've said all I could say honestly on the subject. I wish I could carry it further, but I can't.
But you are saying that, you said before that you have absolute conviction that the way the prayer of repentance is correct, the way it is.
Oh, I think I am convinced that it also is hung with the atom bombs. And, you know, I don't think the atom bomb supply has very much changed overall if 1 or 2 words happen. I wish they hadn't gotten changed. That's not what I'm recommending. But I believe the prayer of repentance as we have it is charged with Baba's
Whether you say will or wish, it
spiritual.
doesn't matter,
Yeah,
it's still there.
right.
I think we have time for
Feel
these
that.
two more. Yeah.
Don, do you know anything about the Persian edition of God Speaks?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it was, you know, done, I think in the Los Angeles area, and the Ajong family were very deeply involved. And I just have to say, if I ever have a basic prejudice for a family, it's the Ajongs.
In a positive way.
In a positive way. They are terrific people, and anything they touch is so filled with loyalty and love for Baba that I would say certainly one of the very best translations that could have been done was done there. Everything I know about it. But I cannot say that even so that the Iranian God Speaks is hung with Baba's spiritual energy. I can't say that.
Sudhir, is it?
Yeah. Kind of related to this, but Lord Mayor I look at as kind of a reference of the events of Baba's life. And is that kind of been verified or re-verified that these are the actual events that took place?
No, it has not been annotated, it has not been authenticated, it has not been attributed, it has not been carefully checked for errors. David Fenster is doing some work on the online edition, which apparently, but this is all scuttlebutt and not official, apparently is being aimed at doing an inexpensive Indian edition of the English Lord Mayor. So David Fenster, reprinting. David Fenster is, I think, doing a very, very careful job as far as he can go now, but it is obviously going to have to go through a very, very fundamental, almost a rewriting someday not too far distant future. Bow himself, everybody, Mayoru, her publications committee, all say that the biggest thing that is not there is the attributing. Yeah. Which Mondele's diary is what come from, because it draws constantly on Mondele diary. And we don't even know which diary is being quoted. Yes, Yolanda.
Just a practical question. How and where can one get a copy of the 3-volume?
Well, most of my friends go on internet and
You have to go
put a
online.
search.
Go online.
And you may
look
have
for-
to pay a fair amount.
I've done it, so I can just say, you go online and you look for used books online. Put in the search engine like Google, used books. You'll get tons of used bookstores that sell through the internet. And then you look for discourses. At that used book site, you look for discourses by Meher Baba. And they'll have 3-volume versions of discourses, because it's been out of print for decades now. And you can buy them through the used bookstores. If you can find
People
it.
are turning them up right now. I was given a set a couple of weeks ago.
There are a number of Baba lovers who are wise to this, and they're hoarding 3-volume editions.
Harvey?
URL?
Google, go to
You have
www.
the URL that makes the comparison between the 7th and the original.
Yes, I do. You ready?
Yes.
www.beachwalla, beachwalla.net/mishandle, mishandle.html. or
Ain't that a great address?
It's either .html or .htm, either one. But that's Dan Tyler's webpage.
We're gonna give Harvey the, Harvey, you're holding us up from lunch, you realize. That's dangerous. Come along.
You know, in '67, I bought 4 volumes of the Blue Books.
Mm-hmm.
3 was this morning, I have 1 volume set, never been opened in the plastic wrapper.
How much you want for it, Harvey?
Put it on eBay, right, exactly.
$100.
No,
200.
no, priceless.
Well, I think we must disband for lunch, and let's come back at 2 o'clock, because we got 2 blockbuster things we gotta take up in 2 hours.
The Supers also produced a single volume, which is the 3 books in 1 binding thing, which I haven't had. No, but that existed at one point. So
Yeah, a small amount were rebound that way. Yeah.
that would be a nice idea. Use on the internet. Look at
I'm gonna make a beeline for the stairs, because I don't wanna get into too much conversation. So if you wouldn't mind bringing up